Hi, welcome back to Let's Get Your Shift Together. I'm Adriana, and today I'm going to be talking about the difference between thoughts versus emotions. This should be a fairly quick video. The reason I'm doing this video is because it might be obvious to some people that there is a difference between thoughts and emotions, but it might not be obvious to everybody. I had trouble figuring out the difference when I first started my healing journey, so I figured it's a good idea to kind of put that difference out there when you're struggling doing the work to kind of figure out what your emotions are that need to be released that you have been repressing for several years. So a thought is just like something you think about, and it can change from one second to the next. You can be thinking about the weather, like, okay, it's sunny today, it's raining today, kind of sucks that it's raining today, and whatever, that's your thought. What is the emotion behind that thought? So thoughts and emotions can kind of feed off of each other, but that doesn't mean that they're the same thing. Anything can affect something else, and a thought can affect an emotion, and an emotion could affect a thought. If you feel a certain way about the weather, that's different than your thought about the weather, if that kind of makes sense. And that repressed emotion behind the rain is what needs to be processed, but maybe you don't even know what the repressed emotion is. The thought is helpful in beginning to identify the emotion, but you don't have to dwell in the thought. I'm gonna pick a random example I'm making this up off the top of my head. Let's say you're 7 years old, your sister kicks you in the shin and calls you a bitch, right? So that's a traumatic experience for a 7-year-old to go through, and 7-year-olds would process that much differently than an adult. And then let's say that after that happened, you're 7, you're crying, you're sad about it, you feel terrible about what your sister just called you, and the fact that she kicked you in the shin, that's not very nice. Your parents probably told you and your sister to just shut up, get along, maybe in nicer words. For just the point of this, you interpreted whatever your parents said to you as a 7-year-old, that you can't get upset when your sister kicks you in the shin and calls you a bitch, because then that's gonna upset your parents, and you don't want to do that. So whatever emotions you had towards that situation, you're just going to repress them and continue doing that for the rest of your life, because when you're 7 years old, that's a very impressionable age, and that's kind of how that loop in your mind gets born, and you continue to repress emotions towards your sister, and then maybe that turns into repressing emotions towards your female friends going forward. Maybe you start repressing emotions towards like any female figure, like your mother, your teachers, whatever. The point is that you have repressed that emotion, and so now you're an adult with chronic pain, and you're trying to figure out what your traumatic experiences were as a kid. And this isn't really like a capital T trauma type thing, but for a child, it is. And that's okay. And you just have to figure that out. And maybe you don't know what the emotion behind that experience was. Thinking about the traumatic event is not going to solve anything, really. How you feel about that event is where you need to start here. Back to the same example. How did you feel as a 7-year-old when your sister kicked you in the shin and your parents completely invalidated your feelings and told you guys to just shut up and get along? Not good. And it doesn't matter if you have the emotion correct to begin with, just start with any emotion. So, I mean, the first thing that might pop to your head is maybe you were pissed off about what your sister did to you. That would be like anger or annoyed or whatever. And you can start exploring that emotion. A good way to do that is with journaling. So you can journal about how you felt in that moment as a kid, and then more things might start popping up as you continue doing that. So maybe underneath that anger is fear, because then you were fearful that if you continued to press the subject with your parents, maybe you'd get in trouble. So maybe as you're like exploring this whole situation, you remember that you stole your sister's crayons before she kicked you in the shin and called you a bitch, or she kind of maybe had a reason to do that. And then you had fear underneath that anger because you were afraid that if you ever stole her crayons again, she would do the same thing to you and your parents would invalidate you again, because whatever a parent says to a child is like probably the most impressionable thing that could happen to the child, because the way they process things is completely different than how adults process things. So the way you process that when you were 7 has stayed with you. That's just the emotion that's behind the other emotion. So emotions can have layers to them. So you have anger, and then you have fear behind the anger, and then you could have like guilt behind that, because then you feel bad that you did whatever you did, and then that caused consequences for you. So you need to journal about those emotions, and as you're talking about this subject. So you don't really have to focus on the subject so much. So when it's something that's like a capital T trauma type thing, where it's something really, really horrible that happened to you and it's something you really don't want to revisit, you don't really have to. You just need the basic gist of it, but you don't need to go into every tiny little detail about it. You just need to go into the emotions about it. And it's going to be really frigging uncomfortable. Like, I'm telling you right now, it is not fun to do that. But that's the whole point, because your brain believes that the emotion behind the trauma is dangerous, and that's why it's causing you to have physical pain, so that it distracts you from that repressed emotion. So once you identify the emotion, that's the first step, and then you have to like kind of journal about it or think about it, but thinking about it might not necessarily make you feel it. The point is, you have to feel that emotion. So if you start feeling the anger rising up in you as you're writing about it or as you're thinking about it, that's good. That is really good. And it's gonna go away. In the moment, you think it's gonna stay there forever, and that's completely understandable, because that's just how the like amygdala lizard brain part of your brain functions. But if you push through those uncomfortable moments while you're feeling that emotion's gonna go away. And then maybe you're gonna identify another emotion, and then you can feel that emotion, go through the same discomfort for a few minutes, and it's gonna go away. And the best way, in my opinion, to do it is by journaling. So you're just gonna get a piece of paper, journal uncensored for 20 minutes. And like when I say uncensored, you're going to just take your filter, throw it in the garbage, and have an old-fashioned temper tantrum on a piece of paper. Because whatever you're writing is just thoughts. And thoughts are nothing. Thoughts are not reality. The emotion behind the thought is the reality that you kind of manifest into the real world that has caused you to be in pain. So as you keep doing this over a span of days, weeks, months, you're gonna find that you're in less pain, and you're more in tune with your emotions, and you're able to more easily identify those emotions and feel them. And it's okay if when you're first starting out, you don't really understand how to feel the emotion. The point is, you have to start somewhere. Another thing I forgot to mention about the journaling, once those 20 minutes are finished, you're throwing that paper in the garbage. You're burning it, you're shredding it, you're writing over it again, you're doing whatever, and you're getting rid of that paper, because those thoughts, those emotions have been put on the paper, and those have been released. And you don't need to do anything with those again. You don't need to revisit it. It's not a Dear Diary, whatever. It's literally, you're just having a friggin' temper tantrum on a piece of paper as a 2-year-old, as that 7-year-old. That's like, you're just gonna go back there and try your best to feel those emotions. As you keep doing it, you're gonna be able to feel more emotions, and that's awesome. Don't expect that you're going to just know how to do this the first time that you do it, because things like this take practice, because this is not something that we're taught to do in our society. This isn't something that we're taught to do at school. We're not taught to like release our emotions and express our emotions. We're taught to suppress them. So God knows how much is repressed in there. I had no idea when I first started out myself. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest here. I had so much shit bottled up, and it was scary realizing how much crap I had that wasn't released. And then eventually it made sense why I was in so much pain. My body was telling me, like, Adriana, you need to do something about these emotions. Like, this just is overflowing here, and you can't go on like this. So here, have some shingles in your mouth, because that was my breaking point. I was going through so much for 4 years with chronic pain, and like my final straw was shingles in my mouth while I was getting my jaw fixed from TMJ, and I also had carpal tunnel and neck pain at the same time. So enough was enough. And it took me a while to figure out that, like, hey, I can talk about this trauma that I experienced as a kid, but that's not solving anything. And really, it's the emotion behind the trauma. So I didn't really have to re-traumatize myself like I did. There were certain things that I ended up not re-traumatizing myself about, because as I went, I developed more awareness on how this whole process works. And really, at the end of the day, it's processing the emotion rather than processing the trauma. And yeah, if you can just feel those feelings and allow yourself to feel them, they will release. And that's how you release your emotions. And then you'll notice you're in less pain, or you have less anxiety, or you have less like skin problems or whatever. Everything that manifests as TMS, tension myositis syndrome, mind-body syndrome, you're gonna notice that there's less and less of it as you keep going. You're not gonna get these results overnight or over a certain amount of time. You can't put a time limit on it and expect that you're gonna be better, because you need to just do the work and focus on doing that and releasing those emotions. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to feel better. So I hope that this was helpful for anyone who's struggling with understanding the difference between thought and an emotion. And I hope that this helps you kind of realize how you need to do the work and how you need to show up in your processing of your emotions, so that you can actually get somewhere with this work. Because you can be doing this, you could journal for 2 years and get nowhere because you're just thinking and not feeling any emotions. So just bear that in mind as you go along. And yeah, if you have any suggestions on other topics that I should talk about, or if anything was unclear, just let me know. I'll probably make another video about it. And I am planning on making more videos on this channel. Have a great day.